Tamet Airfield, North Africa. 2,300 hours. The guard has walked this perimeter every night for 6 weeks. Same route, same timing. The desert stretches 600 kilometers behind him, nearly 400 miles. Nothing comes from out there, the sand doesn't allow it. He completes his circuit, looks out at the flight line. 24 aircraft sitting in rows, fueled and armed for morning. Everything is exactly as it should be. At 0147 hours, the first one explodes, then the second, then all of them. One after another, 7 seconds apart, like something is moving down the line in the dark, deliberately, working from one end of the flight line to the other. The guard is running before he realizes he never heard anyone arrive. No engines, no gunfire. The perimeter wire is untouched. The desert is empty in every direction, and somewhere out there, 20 men are already gone. How do you fight something like that? Because that was Rommel's problem for 18 months. He had thousands of troops, armored patrols, and the entire apparatus of the Afrika Korps trying to find these men. He never did, and it cost him the air war. The desert at night makes no sound you'd recognize. Not silence, something else. A pressure that sits behind your ears and won't leave. Temperatures falling to -4 Celsius, about 25 Fahrenheit, before dawn. 600 kilometers of sand in every direction, nearly 400 miles. This is where the story starts. Not in Cairo. Out here in the emptiness Rommel believed was protecting him. He was wrong about that. It was the thing that killed him. By the summer of 1941, Britain was losing North Africa badly. Rommel had pushed them back 800 kilometers, nearly 500 miles, in 2 months. And every time the RAF tried to hit German airfields, the Luftwaffe knew they were coming. You cannot hide a bomber formation crossing 240 kilometers, 150 miles, of open desert. Radar picks it up. Fighters scramble. The runways get patched within 48 hours, and you've accomplished nothing except losing crews you can't replace. In June 1941 alone, the RAF lost 23 bombers targeting forward airfields. They destroyed 15 German aircraft in return. That math doesn't work. That math accelerates your own defeat. The reason this mattered beyond the numbers, Rommel's entire operation ran on air superiority. His convoys needed protection. His ground offensives needed Stuka support. His commanders needed reconnaissance to know where British armor was massing. Destroy enough aircraft on those airfields, and you don't just win an engagement. You blind him. The RAF understood this. They just couldn't get there without bleeding out in the attempt. David Stirling found the way in, lying in a Cairo hospital bed with a parachute injury and nothing to do except read failed Commando after-action reports. He was 25. The pattern in those reports was consistent. Large force, conventional insertion, compromise before the objective, heavy casualties, negligible results. His answer was almost offensively simple. Stop sending hundreds of men through the front door. Send 4 men through a gap nobody's watching. Walk to the airfield. Place incendiary devices directly on the aircraft. Walk back out. The bombs go off 30 minutes later when the teams are already kilometers away. No radar signature. No warning. No second chance if you're wrong. He wrote a memo. Couldn't get a meeting. So he forged a pass, still on crutches, spine still healing, bluffed past the sentries at Middle East headquarters, and put the memo directly in front of General Ritchie. He broke into headquarters to do this. On crutches. I want you to sit with that, because the entire SAS exists. Because one lieutenant with a broken back decided the proper channels were taking too long and the war wasn't going to wait. It worked. Middle East Command authorized L Detachment, Special Air Service Brigade. 66 men. A deliberately fictitious name, designed to make German intelligence think Britain had a large airborne capability they didn't possess. One shot to prove it could work. The first operation nearly killed the whole idea. November 1941. 55 men parachuted into a storm, actual winds at 90 kilometers per hour, 55 miles per hour, against a forecast of 15. Men scattered across 30 kilometers of darkness, nearly 20 miles. Equipment destroyed on landing. Of 55 men who jumped, 22 came back, 33 gone. Not one bomb placed. Every airfield untouched. Stirling changed one variable. No more parachutes. The long-range desert group had been navigating the deep desert since 1940. Modified trucks, star fixes, and sun compasses, crews who could cover 240 kilometers, 150 miles, in a day and pass within 2 kilometers, barely a mile, of German positions without being seen. They knew which routes avoided Axis patrols. They knew the desert the way a sailor knows a coast. The LRDG would drive the raiding teams within walking distance of the target. The SAS would walk in, hit the airfield, walk to the extraction point. No weather dependence, no scattered drops. They agreed to try. What happened next changed the war. December 14th, 1941. 2 teams, 2 targets. Same night. Stirling took Sirte. Paddy Mayne, Irish, built like a siege weapon, with a combat instinct that made his commanding officers simultaneously grateful and quietly afraid, took Tamet. The LRDG dropped them 16 kilometers out, 10 miles. They walked the rest, in darkness, in cold, that hits like a physical blow in the desert at night, in silence, because sound carries impossibly far when there's nothing to absorb it. I want you to understand what that walk meant. No air support, no quick reaction force. The plan was to not be seen. If they were seen, there was no plan B. They walked anyway. Tamet. 2,300 hours, 2 centuries, predictable routes. Mayne's team lay flat in the sand, 800 meters out, just under half a mile, faces against the ground, mapping the patrol intervals, waiting for the gap. The Lewes bomb, designed by Jock Lewes specifically because standard demolition charges were too heavy to carry in useful numbers, was the size of a fist. Thermite, plastic explosive, time delay. One man could carry enough to destroy a dozen aircraft. That's what turned a nuisance raid into a catastrophic one. Mayne's team worked down the flight line for 40 minutes. When they ran out of Lewes bombs, before they ran out of aircraft, Mayne kept going. He tore instrument panels out of cockpits with his bare hands. The after-action report is careful in its language here. The survivors' accounts are not. First explosion at 01:47 hours, then the rest, 7 seconds apart. While Mayne's team was already 3 kilometers into the desert, nearly 2 miles. 24 aircraft, 0 casualties. Stirling hit Sirte the same night. 14 more, 38 aircraft, 1 night, fewer than 20 men. The RAF hadn't managed that in months of bombing raids. That single night didn't just prove the concept, it proved a methodology that would reshape warfare. The raids accelerated. And I want you to feel what each number actually meant, because these weren't just aircraft. They were Rommel's ability to see, to strike, and to survive. December 21st, Agadir. 17 aircraft. Fewer Stukas available when his Panzers needed cover. December 25th, Sirte again. 27 destroyed. Mayne hit the same airfield with doubled security and did more damage than the first time. January 1942, Marble Arch and Nophilia. 31 aircraft. By now, Rommel's staff knew something was wrong. Loss rates couldn't be explained by conventional RAF activity. June, Benghazi. Fuel dumps destroyed. 30 vehicles burned. The SAS had started hitting the supply chain, not just the aircraft. Planes that survived the raids couldn't fly without fuel. Each time the Germans reinforced one airfield, the raiders hit another. Each time, patrols became unpredictable. The teams watched longer before moving, waiting for the shift transition, that 7-minute gap when one guard detail walks off and the replacement hasn't settled in. When the defenses finally got serious enough that walking in was too costly, Stirling mounted twin Vickers K machine guns, .303 caliber, 7.7 millimeter, on Willys Jeeps and drove straight onto flight lines at 80 kilometers per hour, 50 miles per hour. Louder, messier, and somehow more effective, because the Jeep raids did something the walking raids couldn't. They made forward airfields feel unsafe, even for aircraft that survived. Pilots requested transfers. Commanders pulled squadrons back to rear bases. The SAS wasn't just destroying aircraft. They were changing how the Luftwaffe used the ones they didn't destroy. German intelligence estimated the raiding force at 200 to 500 men. The actual number was fewer than 100, often far fewer in the field at any one time. The 400 aircraft figure is contested, and I want to be straight with you about that. British records claimed over 250 indirect SAS operations. German records confirm at least 180 attributable to ground sabotage. The full figure across all LRDG-assisted operations approaches 400, but some numbers overlap and some couldn't be verified. What isn't contested is what it meant. By early 1943, Rommel's air cover was gone. No reconnaissance to spot Montgomery's gun positions. No Stukas to soften British lines. When he launched his last offensive at Mayne in March 1943, he drove his Panzers into 500 anti-tank guns, waiting in silence. Positioned perfectly, because British commanders could mass forces without fear of being spotted from the air. 52 German tanks destroyed in 6 hours. 0 British tanks lost. Rommel never attacked again. The airfield raids didn't just destroy aircraft. They stripped away the eyes that might have warned him what he was walking into. That's the connection our Mayne episode covers. The link is above. The cost to the men who built this. Jock Lewes, who designed the bomb that made the raids possible, was killed in December 1941. A strafing run on a desert withdrawal, 3 weeks after his first successful raid. He was 28. He never saw what his invention became. The bomb still carries his name. In October 1942, Hitler signed the Commando order. Special forces captured behind enemy lines were to be executed, not imprisoned. Several SAS men were. It was declared a war crime at Nuremberg. The men who went out after October 1942 knew this. They went anyway. Stirling was captured in January 1943. Exhaustion and bad odds finally catching up. Escaped 4 times, transferred to Colditz. Watched the end of the war from a prison window at 30 years old. The SAS didn't stop. It went to Sicily, Italy, France. The doctrine refined in the desert became the template. Small teams, deep insertion, surgical targeting, exploit the gap between where the enemy thinks you are and where you actually are. Every Special Forces unit today, Delta, SEAL Team 6, Australian SASR, traces its operational DNA back to what 30 men proved in the Libyan desert. That's not a metaphor. That's direct institutional lineage. Somewhere in the Afrika Korps files, the ones that survived the retreats and the collapse, there are patrol reports describing tire tracks that led nowhere. Campfires cold before anyone found them. Aircraft burning on airfields where no enemy was ever seen arriving. 30 men. And Rommel never found them. The desert is different now. The doctrine isn't. This one came from a community poll. One of you suggested it, and I'll be honest, it turned into one of the most interesting research dives I've done. If your family has a connection to the SAS, the LRDG, or the North African Campaign, any side, drop it in the comments. Some of the best details I've ever found came from people whose grandfathers were there. And if you've got a story you think should be next, tell me that too. Next episode, somewhere much colder. A battle so brutal the survivors barely spoke about it. And the ones who didn't survive outnumbered the ones who did by a margin that still doesn't feel real. Make sure you're there.